Hello.
Welcome back
to another video. Yes, so this time we're going to do a how-to. We've had many people comment, haven't we?
Yes.
That they're beginners and where to start from. And actually, I'm quite a beginner. I mean, I've only been sewing for what, 2 years? Would you say?
Mm-hmm.
You've been sewing for longer, haven't you?
Yes. Yeah.
Whereas you are.
I'm a beginner-ish, but I have never done. What we're going to be doing today is
Some patchwork.
Patchwork. I have never done patchwork before. I'm a wee bit nervous, but Ting is here to help. So
it's all based on a block, and that's the beauty of patchwork, is that you basically learn a block and you make loads and loads of those blocks.
Yeah.
So Ting is going to be teaching Anya how to make a block, and I'm going to go off and do some work in the shop.
Yes.
So I shall see you later and leave you two to it.
And we're going to, just before you scoots off, we're going to be using the Regency Sussex that we mentioned
you
before.
Like that one, yes.
I really, really like this, so I was dying to do something with it. So very excited to be using it.
And what are you going to do all the blocks? What are you turning the blocks into? You're not doing a quilt?
Oh, no,
right.
we're doing a table runner
Right,
for my sideboard.
Oh, well,
Yes.
I'm feeling such a grown-up right now.
Enjoy, and I'll go put the kettle on and make you a coffee in a little while then. Ta-ra!
Bye!
So, just to recap for people, a charm pack is a collection of 42 5-inch squares,
Yes.
right? And it's normally the whole collection, so you get the whole colourway. And you fell in love with this one, didn't you?
I
And
love it. It's so rich looking.
I worked out this morning
Yes.
that to do a table runner, we're going to need approximately 20 of these, we think.
Yeah.
So you've gone through your charm pack and you've picked out some colours already, haven't you?
Yeah, so Ting advised that it would be good to have nice contrasting colours. So we've decided 4 sets of 5.
Yes.
So we get 20. So we'll do some overhead so we can, when we're laying all of this out. But you can see I've just picked up some of the darker navy and
then you've got
the lighter yellow.
some really dark.
Yeah.
You've got a whole range. There we go, see?
Yes. So you've got some nice light blues, some dark blues. We've got some mustards. There's a nice collection of colours here. So I'm really excited to get started.
And then we've gone through and picked out our sashing as well, haven't we?
Yes. So sashing is the bit that goes in between the blocks.
Used for borders and so on. So again, I suppose if you put these onto here, we went for biscuits.
Yeah, we decided this
sort
kind
of
of biscuity colour.
To
nice
blend
taupe.
in with these.
A warm taupey colour.
Sorry, when you use a charm pack, you get all these little fluffy bits everywhere.
This is why I put it over here immediately. And you will see in the background, one of our lovely viewers mentioned before about doing some samples and what have you. And here are some samples of some lovely fabric.
And Stuart's been busy quilting.
Yes.
Yeah, I've been doing some work for once.
So we're going to get started. We'll switch to some overhead and we will be chatting through everything that's going on as much as we can. And
essentially, we said in this video we want to talk about cutting.
Yeah.
We want to talk about then sewing those together, looking at ironing and nesting your corners and everything to make the block. And we'll do a little bit of the sashing. And then Anya's going to go away and make all 20 blocks up. And then come back.
5 blocks.
Well, 5 blocks, but there's 20,
yes.
in total. And then come back in a second video where I will be replaced by the Mr. Race, who will talk about how to bind the edges and that to give it a nice neat edge. And hopefully, if our measurements are correct, we'll have something that fits your sideboard.
yes, well, even if there's a nice wee bit of spacing, that's all good. I'm really excited. I will show you it in place as well once it's all completed and what have you, because it'll look fabulous. I'm very excited. So yes, now
So
on
we
with
need
the...
to get cutting.
Yes.
So, what we're going to do is we're going to cut 3 at the same time. If you've got a sharp enough blade, that won't be a problem. You just need to make sure they're all lined up on there. Now the pattern we're going for, we need to cut a 3.5-inch square and then some rectangles to go with it. So the rectangles need to be 1.5 by 4.5 inches. So we're going to come in. I've got a lovely ruler here which is 2 inches wide. So
And are you just lining that up with the lines on the...
So these rulers are from Creative Grids, and they're really good because they have lots of grid lines on, and they're all marked up with inches. These have got inches on this side, half inches on this side, and then you've got quarter inches, half inches, because all patchwork and quilting is done in inches. So on here, we need 1.5 inches. Yep. So we've got 1 inch here, and 1/2 inch would be halfway along this next square. So it's just trying to line that up. So there's our inch, and we take it in to that 1/2 inch line there.
Yeah.
Yeah. And then we're using a lovely rotary cutter, which you have to be really careful with. So we unlock the blade, and we're just gonna trim through the 3. This is a nice new blade, so hopefully it's gone through like butter.
Woohoo!
So now we want to cut this into a 3.5 inch square. So hopefully, if our measurements are correct, we should be left with 1, 2, 3.5 inches there. So we need to come in 3.5 inches, which I can never do.
You're as bad as myself. I always get it.
We might be better off doing the 1.5 inches from this side again.
If you can figure that way out.
If you can figure that out.
So that's 1 inch and then halfway through. So
Oh no, we're better off doing it this way.
Yeah.
So then if we take 1.5 inches off there, that should leave us with a nice 3.5 inch square. There we go. Okay.
Fabulous.
And now on this longer one, we just need to trim a little bit off. So it needs to be 4.5 inches long. So what we're going to do, get rid of that. We can do this on this one because it's narrower. 4.5 inches. And so that is all the waste we create here.
Isn't that brilliant?
That little bit of waste. So we can get rid of that. So the reason we want to try and do 3 at the same time is because this is now going to make 3 of the squares up, because you take 3 different patterns and we're probably going to match them up like so.
So you've got nice contrasting colours.
Yeah, so this is where the patchwork kicks in, because you have the contrast, which is why it's nice to have a dark and a light. I'm just trying to squeeze that on the bottom. Hang on, there we go. So we've got that there, so we'll put that yellow one along there, and that blue one there. And so this is what our block is ultimately going to make up like. Now, you're probably looking at that and panicking, because you can see a dirty grey gap here.
Yes.
But what we do with all patchwork is we sew with a 1/4 inch seam. So when we sew, we're going to lose a 1/4 inch off this one and a 1/4 inch off this one. So that will shrink down, which will then make it long enough to sew that.
Do we not then lose? Oh, but we don't
we'll lose another one when we go that way.
And then I suppose when...
And that then leaves you with the finished block size will be, you lose 1/2 inch basically off each of the sides.
And I might be being really daft here, but that's 3. That does not make a square.
No, so we just cut 3 because each one of these blocks is made up of 3 different colours.
Ah.
What you can do is you can cut up all of those fabrics you've chosen, and you don't have to cut them in. You can mix them and match them however you want. We just did it as an example here.
Fab.
So you could cut everything up first and decide how to put your 3s together.
Yeah.
And then we're going to sew them together, and then eventually these will all then be sewn into a 4 patch, and there'll be another one up there. We won't sew these together because you don't put the same colour.
Yeah.
We can mix them up
over here and put a different colour there.
and put a different one there. But even then, you might not want to put these all together because these have all just had them all swapped out. So we'll look at all of them, and then we'll make that, and then we'll repeat that 5 times into your runner.
Fabulous.
If you were going to make a quilt, you might choose to, you just keep making these, and you would go maybe 4 or 5 across that way and 4 or 5 up that way and turn it into a square type quilt. You don't have to do it with a charm pack. If you had one of the layer cakes, which is actually 10 inch squares, you could do a similar process, and 2 layer cakes will get you a decent size single
quilt.
almost to a double.
Wow.
Small double.
Small double.
Yeah.
Fabulous. Okay, so we're going to go and get on with cutting, and we will be back shortly. Thumbs up.
Thumbs
Okay,
up.
back in a minute. So you can use your nails to...
Yeah, so if you're cutting more than one fabric, well, it's not just cutting, it's even if you're layering fabric up. Instead of trying to pick the fabric up and push it with your whole hand or thumbs or whatever, if you lay the fabric on top of each other and you just use your nails, the fabric will move by millimetres, so you can then get it all lined back up.
Okay, so what are we doing now?
So we're going to sew together the block. Now, because we've got one long rectangle and one short one, we need to attach the short one first to the square, and then the long one will then be long enough to cover the length of that join. So what we're going to do is put right sides together. Now we're not going to pin at this point because these are small enough to do without a pin. And on your sewing machine, with patchwork, I always use grey cotton for piecing. It just blends into any fabric quite well, because obviously it's all going to be on the inside anyway.
Yes.
But it does just mean that if it does get stretched a little, it just tends to blend. You just don't see the stitches.
Yeah.
When you come to do quilting, which is patchwork is the making we're doing at the moment. Quilting is actually the decorative stitches on the top.
Yeah.
That's when you choose perhaps a contrasting colour or a variegated thread, which he sells here as well. I do that quite often.
So the variegated thread is the one that changes colour as it goes.
Yeah, and because that's seen on the top. But grey is quite neutral. Some people with like the colour way that you've just bought might go, oh, and I'll buy a roll of blue or dark blue, which would be fine. I mean, it's going to be on the inside, but you've also got these pale colours. And it will just, if it pulls a little bit, you'll see those threads. Where the grey, it just doesn't matter what colour you've got.
Yeah, it's a bit more blended out.
The other thing on our sewing machine, all patchwork is done with a 1/4 inch seam. So luckily we've got a 1/4 inch foot on here, which basically means that as long as we keep the edge of our fabric lined up with the edge of this foot, that will give us our 1/4 inch seam, which then means everything should then be the right size when we're finished, because obviously we want to join all these blocks up together.
Yes, and you want that cord. I say I'm a pretty straight stitcher. I do have the wobbly moments.
We all have the wobbly moments, and luckily you can have, which he's already provided us with today, there is a square ruler over there, so you can square up your blocks, which is useful, especially if you're putting a lot together, because they do need to be ultimately square.
Yes, the wee bit of wobble, just a maker's mark.
Yeah,
that's what I tell myself.
Now the other thing I can show you here is chain piecing. Okay, now chain piecing works quite well when you're not actually trying to do a difficult block, what we're doing. But if I show you I'm going to actually do 2 blocks at the same time. So what you do is you take the first one you're going to do and the second one, and you line the second one up ready.
So that's right sides together.
Yeah. And actually, have you got that waste material we created?
We do.
The other thing I'm going to show you a little tip. This is not great because it's not... actually, have you got one of the horrible charm packs colours? There was a brown that you didn't like.
Yes. It's not horrible, it's just not right for this project.
Yeah. So what you can do with these... normally you'd use an offcut. So if I just trim a bit off here, I'm not bothered about it being straight. What you do is you'd use that as a starting for when you're doing chain piecing. So you drop your needle. Where's his needle? Oh no, there we go. So you drop your needle into the fabric and you sew up to the edge of that. And now we're going to do chain piecing. So what we do is we get our actual pieces together and we bring that up to that spare bit of fabric.
Yes.
And we just carry on stitching. And what you will see at this side is we've now got that little bit of fabric and a little bit of chain stitching there, and then you pick up your next block. Now this is why it's really good to do all of your cutting, because you can chain piece everything at once. So you get your next block and you go straight in and you leave a little bit of chain between and you can carry on. Now if you've got it planned out like you've got there, you could sit there and do all of your squares and little rectangles and you put them all into one long chain.
Fabulous.
And then when you get to the end of your chain, you use another bit of spare fabric to finish it off. And what you can then do is leave that bit of fabric in there and you get your scissors and you just trim off there. And that's chain piecing, where you chained it all together, and you could do that as a big long chain.
That's very
all the way along, and then all you have to do is trim that off. It also means you don't have to tie your fabric knots off because it's sewn in a straight line there.
That's clever. I like that.
Okay. Next, what we need to do is to open these up, and these need to be pressed. And normally you would press to the dark side.
Oh.
So that means that we push, when we iron it flat, we push it over to the dark material.
Ah.
So it doesn't show it through the light material if we did it that way round.
Okay. That makes sense.
If we can. So we just need to press those open now. So all we're going to do is iron these seams flat and ideally iron them over to the darker side of the fabric. So we can do that nice and easily like that. And then if we leave that one there, we can just do the others. Now, it depends which way round it's got to go. So that one needs to go that way. Just run it over there, keep ironing them. These ones, it's not too bad, they're both light. And we're going to take that one that way. So if you put your iron on and then just pull it slightly tight, you can then push the iron over the seam. And ironing them sets the seam as well, just makes those stitches mean they won't pull out when we work with them next time. So we're going to chain piece these in the same way. We're going to attach these 4 here now. So we've ironed these flat, so all we've got to do is now go right side to right side, and these are now the right length to fit along there. And we'll just chain piece all of those and then iron those flat, and we'll nearly have the block ready. So I'm just going to line this back up, find the pedal. And now with all 4, we can chain piece, and this is when it can go quite quickly, depending on how planned your stitching is. So I'm now just taking each one and letting it run in between and then feeding. Just keep it nice and straight. Start to speed up a bit. Grab the next one. Let's put that on that one actually. Keep it nice and neat. Keeping it lined up with the edge of the pedal on the machine. And the last one. So if you were making hundreds of these, you could just sit here now and chain piece them all together and not really have to think about what you're doing. And then as I get to the end, I find my waste material, feed that in, ready for next time. And this time I've got all 4. And we've now got these that now need to be ironed flat, so we can then start putting the whole patch together. We're just going to do the same, just going to pull it ever so slightly to flatten that off.
So when you're doing darker to darker, how do you deal with...
Sometimes you just have to suck it up. Yeah. It depends how intricate your design is, how big your fabrics are. But also sometimes we need to think about the next stage as well, which is we've got to nest these together.
Okay.
Which we'll come to in a moment.
Yeah.
So then hopefully we've got nice squares.
Ooh.
And as I said, we've got a square ruler handy, so if the iron has pushed it out a little bit or it's not quite straight, you can always square up, put the square ruler on and make sure it's the right size you want it to be and trim off any excess, because that looks like, sometimes it's the trick of that pinking, it looks like that's a little bit wide, but we could measure that and just make sure they were all the same size. Okay, so these need to be about 4.5 inches finished, so because of the stitching and because of that foot, which now makes me question whether it is a 1/4 inch foot, but there we go. So I'm just lining up and measuring here. So I checked the size of the square because we know that that was the right size. So that is 1, 2, 3 1/4, and it's just gone off here. You can see it's not quite straight.
Yeah.
So we know that the square is the right size. So I've taken it to 4.5 inches. So all we need to do now is just, we can trim off the excess around here to make them all the same size. 4.5, 4.5. So we're just gonna trim off that little bit of excess, and then we're just going to double check our other ones. I wouldn't always do this sometimes because it is, at the end of the day, it's handmade.
Yes.
And you know, we cut everything. These were all the right size to start off with, and you do get that little bit of variation if the foot's out, or if you just a bit skew whiff. Like, you can see that's quite skew whiff actually.
Yeah.
But when you're sewing it, so I don't always square it off.
So it's entirely up to yourself if you
It's
want
up to, I mean, if it's
yeah.
absolutely desperate that it's got to be a very specific size because it's got to fit a very specific space, then it might be worth doing that.
But as mine's a table runner that's going on top of a dresser, it's not. It doesn't need to be.
No, we'll do it with this one, but we probably won't bother with the other one.
Yeah.
What we could do, we know that the finished block size is supposed to be around about 8 inches. So the other option for us is to sew the 4 together and then actually do a
trim
it
around
onto that size one.
Yeah.
But we've started with these ones now, so we'll finish.
Yeah.
So this was your pattern block that you
Yeah.
decided on. I think it was something like that, wasn't it?
Yes, it was indeed.
Okay. Well, that was the design, but what we actually need to do is to bring all of these corners into the middle.
Oh.
Because that's the finished block.
Oh, I like that even better.
So, so these four meet in the corner.
So this is where it gets into the nested seams.
Yes. It's not too much of an issue at the moment because no seams are matching. This is what's quite good about this, because we're going to sew these two together and then we're going to sew these two together and then we'll sew those to these. Now at the moment, none of these seams have to match up with anything. There's nothing that this goes against here and that goes against there. So we haven't got to nest those seams.
Yeah.
We only have to nest when you have a seam goes against a seam. So you only have to nest once here. Whereas if we were joining them like this, we would have to nest these seams.
Let's move forward.
If we were joining them together that way, you'd have to nest these seams here before you then nest at the top there. So it's quite good that the pattern is as it is with those four squares all in the way you turn it, so they all meet in the middle.
Yeah.
Because we actually only have to nest when we do the 4x4.
Awesome.
Okay.
Yep. So we're going to start by.
We're going to sew these two together now. And then sew these two together. So you can do, again, if you've done all of your squares, you could chain piece that again. You just do them all in pairs and then you lay all your pairs out and decide which pairs you want to go together.
Yeah.
So there is the whole idea of planning everything right from the start, or you can do it a bit more ad hoc and then at each stage you do a bit of planning. So it's like, oh, well, I've sewn all these together now, so let's match pair to pair, and then I'll match that block to another block. So there's different ways of planning.
Yeah. Yeah. And it's quite fun just to go with it and see how you get on. Yeah.
And with the charm pack, that works really well because you have all the different patterns. So unless you stupidly end up with the square and the two rectangles all together at the end, which could be a nightmare. But hopefully, as you're filtering through and you're pulling them out, the whole idea is of mixing a light with a dark. You shouldn't end up with a load of darks at the end.
Yeah.
So we're going to put together what they call a 4-patch, which is essentially the 4 squares coming together. You sew 2 together first, and then you sew the other 2 together, and then you sew them into a 4-patch. So this is also where we need to do a little bit more planning, because we need to make sure that this time we're sewing them together the right way to create the pattern. So if you remember, we moved all of the long bits to the middle.
Yes.
So we're just going to still go right sides to right sides.
Did you say the long bits? So
the long rectangles, yeah.
These are the long rectangles.
Yeah, all pointing to the middle. Because when I put those...
Oh, I see what you mean. So it's not necessarily coming up like that.
They're all pointing into the middle. Yeah, these have all just been rotated round by one.
Yeah, so all your bigger squares
all
are on the outside.
All the squares are on the outside, yeah. So again, like before, we're just going right sides together. Now luckily we're not matching any seams at this point. We've just got one join here, but there's no join on that side, so that's fine.
When you're feeding it through with this join that way, should you consider how you're putting it through
You
the
can
machine?
do, you could go the opposite way. You could go that way, which means it will feed through naturally, flat.
Yep.
The other thing when you're quilting is that you are advised to do rows in different order, like you sew them in one direction and then in the other to stop them shifting when you sew them all together.
I don't understand what you mean.
So what you would do, not too much when you're doing this 4-patch, but you would sew one in this direction,
Yes.
and then the other one you'd sew in that direction, because it when you sew them together it stops them from kind of twisting.
Right.
The tension pulls them in the opposite directions.
Okay, so it keeps them flat and
yeah. So because we've got that going that way, it will just be easier to go through the teeth of the machine if we do it naturally and feed it through. If we go that way, which actually we'd have to sew it that way, we might need a pin just to hold that down to push it through, but there's no real issue here because it's a table runner. We're just going to put it through that way, and it will feed through. And then like before, we're just going to chain piece, so we'll bring over our other two, and again making sure that we're sewing them together in the right pattern now, because this now becomes crucial. And again, if we look where that one is, that's naturally going that way, so we'll pop that in. Okay, so what we've done is these are the blocks. They're upside down obviously at the moment, and we've ironed the seams we've just sewn, the two blocks together. On these pair, they're ironed over towards the right, so you can see.
So this is the seam we've just sewn.
Yeah, so it's ironed over to the right, and this seam up here, again, this is the one we've just sewn, but this time it's ironed over to the left, so they're going opposites to each other. Because what we're going to do is nest these seams together, so hopefully we get a nice crisp point.
So is there a particular reason they should be ironed opposite? Is
Yes,
there a
because
theory
we're going to
behind it?
use this nesting technique now.
Oh, so
Okay,
it's for the nesting.
and you use it. It's a mix of feel
A mix of feel.
and maths.
Okay.
So we're going to create. We still want to sew these together using a 1/4 inch seam. So we want to bring these together like this and run it through the machine down that side. Yeah. But what we want to do is when we open this up, we would quite like that to be a nice crisp point and not like that.
Yes.
Yeah. So by ironing separately, by ironing one over to the left and one over to the right, what we can see is that creates these joins that you should then be able to nest together. And I say it's a feel. If you nip that together and push slightly like that, what you do is you buff them up against each other. So if you feel in there, if I move them apart, you can feel a gap between them, and then if you push them together, just have a feel.
So, oh yeah, you can definitely feel a gap when they're apart.
Yeah, and then if you push them together.
Oh, I think I pulled it too far apart. Hang on.
So if we then just push it together, you should stop feeling the gap.
Yes.
And that should mean they're together. So what we're going to do from our lovely pin pot here is we're going to do that. And it doesn't help because we've got all these other seams here, so we need to remember we're matching these two seams up. So if you start nesting over here, it really will be. So once you're happy that that's kind of nested in there, I tend to do mine by feel, okay? And you can feel that that's buffed up against each other. And then you simply get your pin and you go through. The other way to do it is to go through the stitch line, one of the stitch holes, and make sure that you come out
on the seam
on one of the stitch holes on the other side, because then in theory those two
match up. And you can see they do.
Now I'm saying this over and over again, and we're going to put this through the machine and we're going to open it up and it's not going to match. But
it's going to be fine.
We're going to try our best. It comes down to mainly as I don't tend to use pins very often because I tend to do it as I go along.
Yeah.
I tend to sit at the machine and as I'm feeding it in, I'll feel it and buff it right up just before I feed it into the thing.
Oh, interesting. Does that not cause gapping or anything?
90% of the time, my corners will come out perfect. Normally on a whole quilt, I might lose one or two corners to a bit of a
thing. A wee bit of a shift.
But you can, I mean, if this, was if you were doing a big quilt where you had a huge row of these, what you would actually do is pin them all, because if you're out on this one, you'll definitely be out on this one, and you'll definitely be out on the one after that.
Yeah.
So by pinning it, you'll also ensure that every time you reach a join, that it doesn't, which when you're making a baby quilt, which might be 5 or 7 long.
Yeah.
The other thing is a good thing, if you didn't know about your sewing machine, is I don't know if you've ever heard them talk about the dog's teeth.
They're the bitey bits at the bottom.
At the bottom of the thing.
Yeah.
If you what they do is that they move the fabric for you. So if you've got a bulky fabric, you put the bulky fabric on the bottom.
Yes.
And the teeth pull it backwards and forwards and stretch it so that it fits. So if you're getting towards the end of your fabric and you can see that it's not quite matching up, if you pull the bottom, normally the dog's teeth will help stretch it just enough, as long as it's not a massive error like that.
Yes.
But the dog's teeth can probably correct a small error like that. If you've got sagging fabric, put the saggy bit on the bottom and the dog's teeth will help ease it in.
Interesting. So saggy bottoms to the bottom.
Saggy bottoms to the bottom. So we're going to take this over and see if I've managed to nest that correctly.
And something we should point out about the ironing. When you're ironing, you do not iron with steam.
Oh no, we shouldn't call it ironing, we should call it pressing.
Pressing, yes.
When you do patchwork, you press.
When you do dressmaking,
ironing implies you steam.
Yes, exactly.
And I think this, although our iron isn't on steam, what happens is the steam loosens the fabric.
Yeah.
So again, we're only talking millimetres, but then if every single one is out by a couple of millimetres,
it all adds up.
Yeah.
Fabulous. So we're going to now iron. We're going to now sew this.
We're going to sew this and see if I've managed to.
If your feeling was right.
If it doesn't work, then I'm going to go and get one of the sample quilts that I've made and show you how they're all made.
It'll be fine. I think this will work. This is great. Okay.
Okay.
So let's run it through.
So I haven't checked. I've just sewn over this, so we're going to see.
A big reveal.
We're going to see if the corner has matched up.
Look at that. That's perfect.
Oh, just in case, let's just double check.
Let's have a focus on that moment.
That's quite a good corner for me.
That's really good.
It's because I pinned it.
Yeah.
So all we're going to do now, what you would do is make these up, and then you would simply iron this down so that you reduce some of the bulk on the back.
Yes.
And to keep it nice and flat. Because we're not turning this into a big quilt, we haven't got to worry about nesting these seams. If we were going to join another block on here, we'd do the same, where this would be ironed that way and the other one would be ironed the other way, and we'd nest there. But because we're going to sash it, we haven't got to worry about any more nesting. So the only nesting is in the smack bang centre of that one.
Fabulous.
And that's pretty damn good, which is why you should use pins, people.
Yes, always use the pins.
And you would do that on anything where two joins come together.
Yes.
So like I said, if these were being joined up the other way and they were being joined there, you'd have to nest there. Or even if you were just, if these were full on squares, you'd sew them together in a row, and you'd sew that together in a row, and then you'd nest the rows onto each other. It doesn't matter how difficult this block is, the nesting happens when you join, normally happens when you join rows to rows.
Yeah, that makes sense. Fabulous. So we're now going to go iron this and get on with our next block. But this is our first block before we do the next bit.
And so essentially, because we're now going to arrange this in a table runner, there'll be that one there, and there'll be another one there, and another one there.
It'll be fabulous. You will see.
With a lovely border then.
Yeah, we're going to have...
Border. We're going to put our biscuit coloured border, and then we're going to have a look at one of the range that Stuart's got in the shop to put a wider border after that, but that'll be in another video, I understand.
Yes, that'll be part 2. For now, we're just going to make a few more of these blocks and come back to do the what's it? Sashing.
Okay.
So I've created my second square, and look at
that was yours.
Yeah. My
nested corner
matches, which I'm really pleased about. So we have 2 squares. What happens now?
What we're going to do is we're going to put some sashing in between. And eventually we'll end up with a border to go all the way around the table runner. But we've chosen this lovely biscuity, because I think that tone works quite well with what you've chosen there, as opposed to maybe a white, which would have been far too harsh. So what we've done is we've cut a 2-inch strip out of there, and I've cut a length off that is the width of our block. Okay, so what we're going to do is we're going to attach the top to the the sashing, and then we'll attach the bottom to the sashing, and then when you've made the other blocks, you'll just carry on doing that all the way down your pattern, all your blocks. There's no real need to iron at the moment because that's a big enough gap in between, so we're just going to get the next one. And remember, it's right sides to right sides. Now I'm going to do it this way because we've got a bit of a gap, so we want to make sure that that is caught in there. If I do it that way round, I won't see if I've caught all the... What you can do, if you need to, is you can use a pin to hold these down so they don't buckle up. Because otherwise, if that twists over like that, it will just cause a thick bit under your runner. So if you need to, just use a pin. Although they've obviously been ironed very well by you because they're laying flat.
So that's us, as you can see. The progress has started.
Let's have a look.
Are you impressed?
Yes, very.
I am so impressed.
They're cracking points.
I was so intimidated to even start this. Thank you. My nested corners. I was so intimidated to start this, but you've broken this down really nicely so I can actually start. Because when I first looked at a pattern like that, I thought you had to do each bit individually, and then I thought it was much more complex. And it is
It's not an easy one for a first go. I'll give you that. Most people would have just taken a charm pack and sewn them together.
Yeah, but I love when because he had four different options. Was it 4 or 5 different options? And I was like, oh, I like this one the most.
Really nice.
But I love it because it picks up all the different colours and it just really nicely blended together.
And it works really well with a charm pack because, again, the beauty of a charm pack is it's all 42 squares of the full range, so the colours blend with each other because they were designed to blend with each other.
Exactly this. And if you are going to get off the boat, we were saying, if you do decide to do this and you buy off the boat with fabric,
just yardage,
you want to do your cutting out on one day and then do your sewing the next day, simply because your brain will melt because the amount of concentration required just to sew this bit. I'm already slightly brain tired.
So you're going to, how many of these are you going to do?
So we're going to do 5 in total, so we have another 3 squares.
Because it's down like that.
Yes, so it's going to be a table runner.
So a block, sash, block.
Yeah. I have a question actually while we're here. Am I doing a sash along the top?
No. Because we will put another one across there, but we could do that. We could do it straight away now, or we'll just wait until we put the other border on so we know how long it needs to be.
Yeah.
I mean, technically, yes, there needs to be one across there, but we also said we might have to fiddle with the end.
Yeah, to get the length right.
Yeah.
So you're better just leaving your ends until the end. That makes sense.
Look at behind. I mean, that's really neat as well.
Yes.
Your seams.
We're very professional here.
Well,
look at that ironing. Look at that ironing.
Pressing. Yes. So the importance of pressing came in because we were cutting things and doing bits. It was like the importance of pressing because it made it really easy to sew it across. So the more you've got seams going opposite ways, it was easier to do it because it'd be nicely pressed. The seam stayed nice and flat.
And also, you're wanting this to be a table runner, so we want it to be as flat as possible because if you put something on there and it just wobbles, your glass of wine is going to be off.
That's not the way forward. Well, this is it. It is going to be on our sideboard where my alcoholic beverages will live.
So what's the next stage then? Is that you all done?
No.
I'm going to come back when we come to finish off the board.
Right. Yeah. And
then we will call on your expertise.
Oh, what's that?
You should know. You're going to be helping
I'm
with
going to help you bind. I
binding.
love the binding. They're my favourite part. Definitely.
So it's going to be really nicely finished off, and we're calling on lots of different expertise, so you get the benefit.
Isn't it?
Yeah, it's going to be fabulous. So.
I mean, I can do the binding, but I hate it.
Yeah.
So I normally pass it off to someone who will do the binding.
So tune in for part 2. It'll be up in a fortnight. And yeah, that's it for this one. Thanks a million for watching.
You too. Well done.
Let's hope you get the other blocks made.
Yeah, it'll be fab. And yes, and we'll be back in 2 weeks with part 2. Bye.
Bye.